Story 1. It was officer candidate school back in 2019. This guy I knew, who was a recovering alcoholic, was in my company. We got a 4-day pass for Thanksgiving with explicit guidance not to drink, of course. We all ignored that. The guy decided he was going to do a series of stupid things. First, he grabbed a bottle of whiskey and a case of White Claws and started on those. Then, with the White Claw case in hand and obviously hammered, he headed to Waffle House. There, he ate his meal and left without paying. Naturally, the police followed up and engaged with him. Instead of saying, "Oops, my bad, slipped my mind," he decided to throw a punch. He was gone relatively shortly thereafter. Story 2. The person who came with me and my recruiter all the way to Fort Jackson threatened to shoot everyone and took swings at the drill sergeants on our second day of in-processing. Story 3. The first people, one male and one female, to get expelled were caught having sex in a trash dumpster of all places. Imagine the drill sergeant's face when he saw it. Edit. Basic training, by the way. Story 4. We had a guy in basic who decided to smoke marijuana as his last hurrah before shipping off. One of the first things you do in basic training is a drug test. He was gone by the second week when the results came in. Story 5. When I became a non-commissioned officer and moved to Schofield, a soldier who had also just arrived from basic training went and got a full face tattoo. He had to wear a bandage over his face until his paperwork was processed and was discharged. Story 6. Dude decided it was a good idea to smuggle a 17-year-old on base to be his roommate. Then, he tried to report the kid for heroin usage while also using the drugs himself. He also used his government travel card at the strip club, rationalizing that it was okay because his other credit cards were maxed out. Story 7. I was sitting in the annual sexual assault prevention training, and we were going over how being married does not automatically grant consent and that no means no always. A guy scoffed and said, "That's ridiculous. I get no all the time with my wife, but I still get mine." He was removed from the class and was gone after a brief investigation. Story 8. Buddy went to the local bars and drove home drunk, crashing headfirst into oncoming traffic and flying out the front windshield. His brain damage was so severe that they allowed the family to see him before withdrawing life support. Story 9. In basic training towards the end of infantry school, we were having the grappling tournament and our guaranteed honor graduate lost, threw a tantrum, got physical with the drill sergeants trying to calm him down, was bound and carried out of the training area. We never saw him again. Story 10. You usually see a lot of dropouts during basic training. A few will claim to be suicidal on the first day to get discharged. There was one who got discharged after a few weeks at basic for not telling his recruiter he had a previous knee injury, another with a constant nosebleed, and around week 5, one of our trainees disappeared. It turned out before his polygraph test for his top secret clearance, he admitted to doing bath salts. He stopped by for less than a minute to clear his locker and immediately left without saying anything. He was still at Lackland after we graduated. When I got to my first duty station in Mildenhall, there were a few getting discharged. 2 guys were seeing the same female in the unit. One got jealous after coming back from a temporary duty and smashed his car windshield in at the dorms. Another one flooded his dorm room and didn't tell anyone for weeks. There were about 4 inches of water and mold up and down the walls. One guy used his government travel card on things not associated with government travel, and another guy pulled the fire alarm because he couldn't break into a female's dorm room at 3:30 in the morning. A master sergeant was caught in an undercover office of special investigations sting operation. He was caught trying to solicit a 14-year-old and possessing child pornography. He was reduced to Airman Basic and sentenced to 10 years at Leavenworth. My second duty station was mainly discharges for marijuana use. Story 11. In Air Force basic training, we had a girl write "Forget You, Sergeant name" in huge letters on the bathroom stall, using the Sharpie we were issued. That was a chaotic afternoon. They put us in the rain and did group physical training to get someone to talk. They had us in our dorm talking to each other, which led to 2 fights when girls accused each other. They gave us all a write-up for the day, which meant the girls who already had write-ups for other reasons had to pack up everything and be moved back to another group. Finally, after a couple of hours, a girl admitted it. She was sent away and ended up being expelled a couple of weeks later. Story 12. Military personnel, understand that your spouse's actions and words can affect your career. Once, the spouse of a first lieutenant at a meeting asked the base commander if reveille could be rescheduled to a later time during the day because she lived on base and the song woke up her baby every morning at 0700 hours. Collective gasp in the room. Story 13. British Army Infantry Training Center Catterick. A lad was in our training section about 4 weeks into basic training. He arrived without any of the gear he was supposed to bring and, being completely useless, he was told to report to the guardhouse and was swiftly arrested by civilian police. It turned out he had been charged with attempted murder just before he signed up and skipped bail to join the army. How he got through the recruitment process, I'll never know. He was absolutely useless. Story 14. There were a few that got dismissed during basic training, usually due to their own poor effort, but a couple of memorable ones were one person who, during an unauthorized weekend visit to the female barracks, consensual, not inappropriate, was caught when a group of military police shouted out that we'd all better come out because they knew we were in there. So we all ran out and scattered, except for one guy who decided to jump out of the upstairs window and landed on one of the military police, so he got an administrative discharge. Then there was a guy who stole pieces of other people's equipment to pass the final kit inspection and got dismissed. Story 15. I had an airman who constantly messed up. Every time was worse. I felt bad for him. Not a bad guy, just did dumb things. While deployed, he missed multiple shifts. Since our job only has 2 people, I had to adjust hours to get him to work on time by going to his dorm an hour early and staying with him an hour at work to make sure he wasn't going to fall asleep, extending my work hours to 14 a day. He moved out of his apartment and was living in a car or tent in a parking lot. I never knew he moved, but someone saw him and told leadership, going around me. I loved having my first sergeant call me into his office, asking me about this and looking like an idiot for not knowing. It was for 2 weeks, and by the time I found out, he had already found a new place. Constant errors in his job duties. I had to have someone else review all of his work to ensure it was done correctly. Finally, a driving under the influence incident. I had to stand in front of the wing commander with him and our leadership while he got scolded. When the wing commander asked him to leave and asked us if we could turn this around, the room went silent. I finally said, "Hell no. He needs to go." Afterwards, my squadron commander went off on me, saying that was the wrong thing to say and that we always say that we could work with him. Sir, with all due respect, he's not fit for this. He's going to go back to being a crew chief in 3 months and get people killed. He needs to go. They kicked him out. Again, just one of those guys who really didn't have bad intentions, just not competent. Story 16. I was on an oiler and we were taking on oil from a United States naval ship oiler, commanded by Navy staff with a civilian crew. The ships were each about 30,000 tons and cruised just 150 feet apart. My ship was 650 feet long. The helmsman on the United States naval ship oiler was fixated on his ship's gyro compass for maintaining a given heading when he should have been looking at my ship. The transfer was proceeding, and no one on the United States naval ship noticed that the ship's gyro compass had lost power. The United States naval ship started to drift toward my ship. Someone on the United States naval ship oiler noticed the drift and ordered the helm hard to port. This was the mistake because ships don't turn at the stern. They pivot about the ship's center of mass. So, when the United States naval ship oiler started its turn to port, its stern swung toward my ship and got within 20 feet before the ship slowly pulled away. Thousands of tons of metal have a lot of inertia, and any collision is potentially catastrophic. The next time we saw the United States naval ship, it had a new Navy commanding officer and a new Navy navigator. It was not their fault directly, but both were responsible for training the helmsman. The commanding officer was never going to get another command, and the navigator would have lost valuable promotion points. Story 17. I saw a guy soil himself in boot camp so the drill instructors would send him to medical. He froze when they were yelling at him. I guess he didn't know how to handle being yelled at, so his response was to soil himself and let it out of his leg hole. Story 18. I knew a guy that was an enlisted rank 4 dating the admiral's daughter. They had a fairly rocky relationship. They crashed and burned, and it was quite bad. I'm pretty sure he got out a year or 2 after that and is probably still listed for extra duty. Story 19. I've seen all kinds of chaos. I had a soldier fake some kind of heart attack scenario where she was clutching her chest and hyperventilating out on a 10-day field exercise so that she could come out of the field and participate in a stripper contest at a strip club. There was a soldier at Camp Casey in South Korea who stole an M88, a huge recovery tank designed to tow M1S or Bradleys or anything really broken down, and tried to take it off base to a bar where he had paid the bar owner money for a girl he fell in love with to buy out her contract with the bar, and she took his money and kept the girl. He crashed the M88 before he got there. Story 20. Went home on leave. Went straight to girlfriend's house and commenced drinking. Drowned in his own vomit during the night. Didn't go see his mother before starting to party. Story 21. One of my soldiers went absent without leave to Juarez, stationed at Fort Bliss, for a week. His platoon sergeant found him a week later hanging out on an apartment balcony adjacent to the base after he ran out of money. Story 22. Before shipping out to boot camp, I saw a few guys who did pass their drug tests at the military entrance processing station. They thought they were good and went out and partied hard before shipping out to boot camp. When they arrived, they saw they had to take another drug test. A couple of days later, their names were read off and they were never seen again. Story 23. This happened during the early 2000s. A male lance corporal was 6 months from end of active service. A female second lieutenant falls in love with him, and together, they can't wait to solidify their relationship. They get married in secret. Command finds out. He is demoted to private first class at non-judicial punishment. The second lieutenant gets a court-martial and a dismissal. The private first class gets stop-lost and has his end of active service extended so he can deploy to combat. The former second lieutenant has to move into base housing for married private first classes. Story 24. This guy in my Navy class of 3 thought his visiting wife was cheating on him. She wasn't, with someone from back home, so he took a steak knife and slashed his own throat in his barracks room. Guess who had to go to his room, clean it up, and get his things out while he's recovering in the hospital? Me and the other classmate. He came back to class a week later with a huge scar across his neck and lost a ton of weight. He stayed in the service somehow, but I heard a year or 2 later from the guys he was stationed with that he did something else to get processed out. Had a guy in my shop move in as roommates in an apartment off base, and he started dating a heroin addict, kept claiming she was going to get clean. One night, he gets stopped by police with her, and the policeman asked if they've been drinking, and he says no but makes a needle shooting into his arm motion to the cop with a big stupid grin on his face. Another roommate and our friends were walking home from the bar one night, rang the Scientologist church doorbell, and dropped their pants to whoever answered the doorbell. They got caught. They didn't get into any real trouble, but the possibility of being charged with a hate crime hung over them for a few weeks. Story 25. Well, the kid's career never even started according to the Marine Corps. He stole a round from the range during Phase 2. We found the round in his shower bag when we got them mixed up. The kid had the bright idea of confronting the drill instructor he didn't like. It was a wild time. Story 26. Well, 2 really serious incidents happened. First, a guy brought a collection of child pornography and left the binder in the laundry room. It was reported to the lead non-commissioned officer, who was curious and looked through it for new content. He found it, and long story short, the guy was picked up by the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and sent to prison for a few years. It turned out he had a large amount on his home computer and was involved in a ring, according to rumors. The second incident involved someone sexually harassing a woman at a bar. It didn't work out well for him because she happened to be the wife of the executive officer at his command. He faced disciplinary action and lost rank, but it didn't completely ruin his career. Story 27. I guess it wasn't all that quick, but we sent a guy to dive school along with his wife who stayed in on-base housing, which was pretty hospitable of the cadre. After about a month, one of the instructors called me and said, "Hey, you need to talk to your guy." I called him up and gently urged him to quit messing around. Now, we had never seen this guy before he went off to basic training and advanced individual training. The recruiters just plugged him into the military occupational specialty without even telling us. This wasn't good because we had an extensive vetting process worked out from bitter experience. He turned out to be fine physically, but mentally was another story. A few more weeks go by, and the instructor calls me again. "The police brought us your guy," he said. He was passed out at a stoplight with his door open and a bunch of empty beer cans on the ground.